Welcome back to the Rose Garden Report podcast. I am Sean Highkin, the author of the Rose Garden Report newsletter, which you can subscribe to at rosegardenreport.com. Free and paid subscriptions are available. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe, do that, hit subscribe on YouTube. And then also from an audio standpoint, you can get it on the Odyssey app because we're part of the Odyssey family. And then Apple, Spotify, all of that. Subscribe, rate, review, do all of that. I am really excited about the podcast that I've got for you today. The biggest news, obviously, in the Blazers world the past week has been the passing of Bill Schonely, obviously the Blazers' original play-by-play radio announcer, the mayor of Rip City, the guy that coined the term Rip City. And I wanted to get someone on who I think would be able to appropriately put in perspective A, what he's meant to this franchise, and B, just how great he was at the actual job. And I figured there would be nobody better to do that than the Blazers' current TV play-by-play guy, Kevin Calabro, who is a legend in the business in his own right, going back to being the Sonics radio guy in the 80s and then doing a lot of national stuff for ESPN. He's one of the legends of the NBA broadcasting world, kind of, on his own, but even his career and reputation and legacy kind of pales in comparison to Bill Schonely. And so I figure he would be a good guy to bring on to do that. And so, obviously Kevin and I know each other quite well. And so I asked him to do it the other day and he said yes. And, we were able to just get this done. I just wrapped up with him. It's great conversation, goes all sorts of different places. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Bill Schonely and Kevin's own relationship with him, going back to the late 70s when they first met each other. We get into kind of some of the technical and kind of aspects of why Bill was as great as he was as a broadcaster from the perspective of somebody who is a very accomplished broadcaster in his own right. And then we also kind of get into some other stuff about, how Kevin's approach to calling games has evolved over the years and, his thoughts on kind of the current crew and, working with Lamar Hurd and, a lot of that different kind of stuff. And then from there, we also just get a little bit into the other major loss that the Blazers had over the past week. That would be John Curry, who was the longtime camera operator, who, unlike Bill Schonely, I actually knew quite well because he was always at, every single thing, every media scrum, everything. He was one of the guys behind the camera, and so he was somebody that I talked to a bit and, over the years, and everybody kind of had a relationship with him. He's not nearly as much of a household name, obviously, as Bill Schonely, because he was more of a behind-the-scenes guy, but he was also a great guy, and that was a huge loss for the organization, so Kevin and I talked about that, and then at the end, we get into a little bit about the current team and the losing skid that they're on right now. They won the game against San Antonio the other night, but things I think everybody can agree are just not great right now with the team, just overall, for obvious reasons. And so Kevin and I get into some of that, kind of his view on like why they haven't been more consistent, what maybe needs to change as far as the rotations and all that kind of stuff. Kevin's great. If you're listening to this, you don't need me to tell you how great Kevin Calabro is at what he does, and this is a great conversation that we just had, so I'm really excited to give it to you now. Well, Kevin, I wish we were doing this under a little bit happier circumstances, but I figured you would be a good person to bring on to talk about Bill Schonely, which obviously that's kind of the biggest news in the Blazer world right now is his passing over the weekend at 93. So I appreciate you coming on and doing that with me.
Sure.
So I guess going back to, do you remember the first time you ever met him or, encountered him? I'm assuming it was probably like when you were with the Sonics in the 80s and he was still with the Blazers. Was that kind of the first time you
Yeah, we had a number of interchanges at that point, but I go back to 1979. I just graduated from Butler University in Indianapolis, and I was doing what they called the pre and post game show, which essentially was like a little 10-minute introduction to the game on the flagship station at WIBC in Indianapolis. And I was just starting off, and it was kind of a part-time gig for me because I was like an overnight disc jockey at WIBC at the time. But I followed professional basketball since I was 10, 11 years old when the Indiana Pacers came to town in 1967 at the old Coliseum in Indianapolis. And, was really captivated by the game, loved the game, grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and knew all about the Portland Trailblazers and the Seattle Supersonics because we would get those. You'd never get the broadcasts out there of any West Coast games in Indianapolis. It was always Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Chicago Bulls, exactly. That was it. Maybe the Cincinnati Royals.
Right.
But so I was fascinated with these teams because the uniforms looked different. The playing style was different. Everything about it was different with those teams from the Northwest in the late 70s. So when Bill came to town, they were world champions 2 years removed, I guess it would be. And then I was able to get an interview with him and, stumbled down there and introduced myself and was really taken by, just the presence of the guy, big voice, looked you in the eye, gave you the firm handshake, the full head of white hair, silver hair, and kind of a flamboyant style, which I really liked. We obviously at that time, the only way you would hear these great play-by-play voices is through bootleg tapes that you get in college, right? And a buddy would have, and you'd copy the tape and pass it down and so forth. Reel to reel. These are reel to reel tapes.
So it was like, I mean, I guess like another Blazer connection because one of the other most iconic people in the organization is Bill Walton, who's a huge Deadhead. So it's like Grateful Dead bootleg, like concert tape trading was like, but for like sports broadcasts.
Exactly, sports or boss jocks as they were called at the time, disc jockeys, and and Bill. In his development as a young announcer, spun records at some point. I mean, all guys did.
Right.
I say guys because there were very few women in the business at that time behind the microphone. That was just kind of the age we were in. But so I think I like to hope I appealed to him in that 5-minute interchange we had as a young guy getting a start, learning the business. And I asked him several questions about his club and so forth, and he was forthcoming and great.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it. But I was trying to go back and rack my mind on, all right, when was the first time you really met Bill? And then fast forward, I actually did the Kansas City Kings in the 83-84 season. It was 2 years before they moved to Sacramento, and ran into Bill again. And, he claimed that he remembered me, and he welcomed me into the league, and so
it's always fun when somebody who's like that big of a deal says they remember you because you're always just like, oh, he's just trying to be nice, like you don't actually know if it's
he wants you to feel at ease,
right,
around him and so forth, because he kind of knows, he's got some gravity there, a little gravitas, and you're to a degree you're a little intimidated by his presence. So he was very good. He was that way with everybody. I think that's what everybody remembers about him is just the way that he put everybody at ease. When they were around, they knew he was the voice, as I used to call him. I used to call him the voice, and I called the great Bob Blackburn the voice as well. There's just something about being an original voice of a team that resonates with fans and communities for years and years and years after these great voices have left the air. That to me was. That was the value and the intrigue of meeting Bill Walton. Bill
Walton also, but
the same way when I was around Bill Walton, when I met Bill Schonely. Any of those, when you meet any of those great iconic players, broadcasters, whoever it is that you grew up watching as a kid, you have that impression of them, and then when you meet them, it's hard to describe.
Chick Hearn also with the Lakers, I'm sure was. One of those too. Yeah.
Chick was, and I put him in that category with Bob Blackburn, Chick Hearn, Bill King. It was the great play-by-play voice of the Warriors for many years down in San Francisco. Hot Rod Hundley at Utah, Hots was phenomenal as well. I mean, these guys, in my mind, were sort of pioneers of sports broadcasting play-by-play. They're sort of second generation of the original guys like Marty Glickman, who was the original voice of the New York Knicks. A lot of people go back and the whole Syracuse group identifies Marty Glickman as kind of the genesis for play-by-play out there. And then, of course, the Albert brothers with Marv and Steve Albert is a phenomenal announcer as well. And Al did a terrific job, was in the NBA for a long time. So, you put Bill into that category as well, and represented, of course, Portland, Oregon, the state of Oregon in the Northwest, in exemplary fashion around the league. Yeah.
And then you started to be around him a lot more once you took the Sonics job in the 80s, because those teams, it's obviously the Portland-Seattle rivalry was a thing, and those guys would play each other several times a year. So I'm assuming you just kind of got to know him a lot better then, because you guys were just around each other a lot more.
I did. And, Bill took on a different era at that point now with me, because now he saw me as and graciously so saw me as a contemporary, because now I'm in the league. It's 1987. I'm with the Sonics, and I've established myself for a couple of years there. Sonics, in that period of time, we're in transition. And of course, the Blazers were phenomenal in the early 90s, going to the World Championship 2 or 3 years, and just wreaking havoc on the West. And, they were victimized, the Blazers or the Sonics, on several occasions. And just remember when the Sonics finally got a foothold there in the early, about 93, when they went to the conference finals and lost to the Phoenix Suns and Charles Barkley, with Gary Payton and Sean Kemp and Detlef Schrempf and that group, Sam Perkins. It was just a great group. Percy Hawkins would later join the group. And always tremendous matchups against Terry Porter and Clyde and Duck, Buck Williams, that whole group, Uncle Cliff, phenomenal competition. And Bill, of course, being the uber Blazer that he was, would kind of give me the cold shoulder a little bit on game days. Well,
you're the enemy.
You were the other guys.
Even the broadcaster's the enemy.
And I don't know, maybe I was imagining things, but we kind of wanted it that way too. It made it more fun, I think, for everybody when that rivalry really ratcheted up. And I know George Karl was the one that really instigated that. He came in, and I remember him saying publicly he just didn't understand the kind of the affinity that the two cities had for one another. He wanted to get in there and stir things up. He wanted some vinegar. He wanted some salt, and so they re-energized. I think it was it was a brewery, and they had a cup that every year that the Blazers and the Sonics would vie for. So it's a local brewery. I can't recall offhand, but the I-5 rivalry, the point is it was stirred up once again, and it was very impassioned, and everybody got involved, even Bill and me and Blackburn.
So let me ask you this, as you're coming up in kind of the broadcasting industry, in the, as you're saying, like the late 70s, early 80s, it was kind of when you were first, getting started, coming up. And obviously, you were talking about, like, you had the different tapes that you were getting of different broadcasters. And, I assume Bill was kind of one of the ones that people looked at as the standard. Well,
I mean, Rip City, come on, Rip City.
Well, right. When you coin a phrase like that becomes like the phrase associated not just with a franchise but with a city. But in your own, like, professional opinion, I guess, as somebody who's been doing this for, you weren't doing this as long as Bill was, but you've been in the game for, a minute at this point. What, like, every Blazer fan and every person that has, like, has their own experiences with Bill and listening to Bill kind of has their own, like, things that they love about him. But in your opinion, as, a fellow broadcaster and a very, accomplished broadcaster yourself, what made him so great as a broadcaster? Like, even taking, like, the personal stuff out of it, like, just as a broadcaster, like, why was he one of the best?
Well, the voice was commanding, and for starters, I mean, the voice cuts through all the din of the crowd and the over-amped speaker system and everything that's going on in the gym. I mean, you can hear that voice cut right through it. For starters, his enunciation, he was crisp, and he kept it simple. Not a lot of analytics, not a lot of numbers. A description of what he was seeing in clear, clean, precise terms. what he was feeling at the time. You could tell it. You can hear it in the voice. Thing about Bill, thing about really good radio guys, and I consider myself a radio guy that's doing TV, is that you can hear the tone of the voice and tell where your team is at, how they're playing that night. I mean, within about 10 or 15 seconds, a really good guy, without hearing the score, anything in particular that would tip you off, you can hear the tone of his voice and you can tell, oh, it's not a good night for these guys. Bill's not feeling it tonight, or they're running away with this thing, and he's just having a grand old time. He wouldn't be at he wouldn't be anywhere else at this point. The really good ones, the ones that I've told you about, Bob Blackburn in Seattle and Bill King and Chick Hearn in Los Angeles did a phenomenal job. Oh my God, Chick was one of the best at that, listening to that tone of voice, and you could tell what was going on. And then Bill would add those catchphrases of his that would kind of intrigue you, the Cyclops, or taking it through the equator, and then you get to the court, and okay, I got it. I see that now. And so, you wouldn't take on his terms necessarily, but you kind of come up with your own phrases, and you do so many of these games that you come up with the catchphrases and terms for different locations on the floor, or maybe nicknames of a player and so forth, where you've shortened the name, or you've given him a nickname that the team has given him during practice or in some occasion of that nature. And it all draws the fans in and makes them feel like, yeah, we're at home, we're a part of this. He's our guy. He's going to be there every night for us behind the microphone. And we feel comfortable with him, relaying the signal to us. That signal that's bouncing out over the airwaves. It has always intrigued us and has been such a mystery. None of us behind the microphone could tell you how that works. It just does. And when it resonates with the fans, that's when it's clicking for you. And Bill was he was one of the best.
Yeah. And he was still, by the time you said that this is how many years have you been with you came over in what, 16, 15?
I came over in 16.
Okay. And he was still kind of around.
Oh yeah.
The organization.
Bill was the ambassador, until he retired last year.
Up until last year, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
And so, like, what was, kind of, did you, when you first came on, like, was he somebody you talked to before you took the job? Was he somebody that was like,
He's one of the first guys that called me after I got the job, welcoming me to Portland and to the broadcast, which meant a hell of a lot to me. It really did. When so many were doubting me at the time. Here in the market, he was one of the first to reach out and greet me, and that really resonated with me. It meant a great deal to me because I hadn't.
When you say doubting you, is it just because you think a lot of fans were like, oh well, he's a Sonics guy, he's a Seattle guy, why is he coming here? Is that kind of what the
correct?
Yeah.
Bill of course was a Seattle guy. So, and there have been several Seattle guys that have come to Portland that have been successful here, whether it be player, general manager, coach,
owner,
broadcaster. So, and Bill, to agree, let me know that. And
nice, but and then did he kind of? I'm sure he had because he's been here from the beginning. He kind of, when you took the job, was kind of telling you like, this is what you need to he had some probably insights for you about the organization and about the fan base. That he's sharing any of that stuff with you, or
not really? What he did share with me is he always felt like he still had the juice and he wanted to do games.
Right.
He still wanted. I mean, so at this point he's 85 years old and he felt like he still wanted to do some games. That was difficult, obviously for him. It always is when you're doing something you really love and you have a great passion for, and you think you're hitting it out of the park, and the fans are asking you about it, and you're going to the grocery store here in Lake Oswego, or you're in Portland having dinner downtown, and people are asking why aren't you on the mic anymore? It's hard to explain when you don't have an explanation. So I was always happy to be in his presence when he was the ambassador at the game, and I would always tell him, you mean a lot just being out here, being a part of it. I know this is not calling games, but just to be in the arena is just a blessing to be, in my mind, to be affiliated with an NBA team in any way. and if you're out there representing and you're on the court, it did mean a lot to us and to the players, and I know to the coaches to see him out there, greeting us, shaking the hands, coming by, saying hello. Usually he would come over to me and lean in and go, "Don't screw it up."
Yeah, I mean, Travis Demers talks about this all the time, that he refuses to let himself be called the voice of the Portland Trailblazers because, in his opinion, there's only one person that ever can actually have that title.
The thing is, though, you've got to assume that, and I understand Travis's humility, and he's a terrific young talent.
He is, yes.
But he will, I think, learn to know that, he represents the organization. He's got to wear the mantle now. The baton has been passed. Brian Wheeler was a phenomenal, one of the greatest radio guys I've ever heard. And unfortunately, his health situation caught up to him. God love him. I'm still in contact with him.
How's he doing? I haven't talked to him.
Well, he's been in and out of the hospital, unfortunately, and had a spell at home for about 10 days, and now he's back in the hospital. So he's trying to get himself situated and get the weight under control and the other health issues that he has. But he's in great spirits. Every time I talk to him, he's upbeat, he's positive, he's laughing, telling me a story.
Yeah. I should reach out to him. I haven't talked to him in a
year absolutely. He watches all the broadcasts. He's nails on the team, and he knows what's going on and the inside and so forth. And he was around for better than 2 decades following Bill Schonely, which had to be extraordinarily tough to follow that act.
Well, he was more because Bill's last year as the full-time broadcaster was what, 92, 93?
90, I thought.
Okay, it was like, and see, so I was born in 89, so my Wheels was much more my childhood memories of growing up here and watching games on TV, listening to games on the radio. Wheels was much more my era than Schonely. And
we were talking about what makes these guys great, and Wheels had those same attributes.
Yes,
big voice, tremendous command of the language. The articulation, he in a short phrase could give you a real indication as to where the team's at, how they're playing, without giving the score again. He falls into that category as well. Hear the tone of his voice. Wheels is up, Wheels is down, Wheels is sideways with the team. So you knew. So Portland's been blessed with some terrific announcers over the years that have rolled in here. When you consider the analyst, Steve Jones, just did a remarkable job for all those years. Eddie Doucette, who was on TV when Sean decided to go back to radio, and Eddie did the TV side. Eddie Doucette he's an iconic voice as well, out of Milwaukee. Who termed that big shot of Kareem's the skyhook when he was in Milwaukee. So
even Lamar right now, I think, is one of the best.
Oh, Lamar Hurt, he's one of the best I've worked with. I work with a lot of analysts, and he's top 2 or 3 in my book, without question. Question. Great command of basketball knowledge, obviously.
Yes.
Just in terms of X's and O's, the rules, the presentation is excellent. His humor is terrific. It shows great compassion on the floor, on the microphone for the players that are on the floor and the coaches, and has a true understanding, players only type understanding, I think, of what they're going through and so forth. And he's come a long way in a very short period of time. I did some games with him on the Pac-12 network, and I could tell then he was going to be pretty good. I'll tell you a quick story about Lamar. When after Paul Allen had made a decision to move on and change the broadcast, and Mike and Mike were no longer with the broadcast, and they reached out to me to ask if I'd be interested in talking to them. And then I took the opportunity with the Blazers. We then were faced with a situation, all right, who can we put in that other seat? And it never, and I'm ashamed to say this, but it just never occurred to me that Lamar Hurd would be the guy. And the reason was I was so stuck into the old thinking of, it's got to be an ex NBA name, a name guy, or it's got to be a coach who's bounced from job to job and now is in broadcasting, has probably had 2 or 3 broadcasting jobs. So we were looking at those types of people, and no one wanted to make the commitment to do all 82 games. We had a kind of a patchwork where you could put 3 or 4 different guys together.
But you don't want to do that. You want to have it be consistent.
You don't want to do that. I've done that before. We did that in Seattle for a number of years, and you get a variety of voices, and all these guys are good, but none of them really want to make the commitment to the broadcast and to do the broadcasting, and more importantly, to the community, to come stay in the community, work in the community, do the other things that you need to do. And to their credit, I think it was Jeff Curtin was our director of broadcasting was contacted, or maybe Dan Hyatt, our producer, by Lamar and his people, and we got him in, and they put Lamar and I in a booth at Moda and set us down, and we did I think it was the Warriors and the Cavs, the championship, the World Championship that had happened that summer, in the summer of 2016, which, by the way, I had done on radio, on ESPN radio, with UB Brown. So he and I did the game. We did a recreation. We did about 15 minutes, and I remember Dan Hyatt getting on the microphone, our feedback to us, and saying, "Hey, that was terrific. Well, you want some more? No, we can do some more here." No. I think we got it.
I've seen enough.
You could hear it in his voice. So
you know what that kind of reminds me of. This is obviously like a totally different level of that type of thing. But I remember the story of I think this was on Woj's podcast years ago. He had Sonny Vaccaro, the former the longtime sneaker executive, who's like one of the influential guys kind of in that end of the business, and he was talking about how in the early 2000s somebody sent him a VHS tape of there's this kid in high school in Ohio who might be the next, the next hot prospect. And then he was sent like a VHS tape of like one St. Vincent St. Mary's game. He watched 1 quarter and he's like, okay, I've seen enough. I don't need to watch any more of this.
Well, the thing is, they could have looked at any of those Pac-12 tapes that he didn't. And
how many of those games did you guys do together?
That's why I say I'm just so ashamed that realize that now looking back, it never even occurred to me. So you really have to broaden your taught me a lesson. Hey, we're all learning. If you stop learning, you're not going to advance. But I how many games I did? I don't know, probably half dozen games. Because that was the thing about the Pac-12. You never had you never had the same producer, director, crew, analyst, nothing. You're just kind of bouncing. But it was a great experience. I think Lamar would tell you, a phenomenal experience. And to this day, he has many friends. I've got friends there at Pac-12 Network as well. They did a great job with what they had. So after we get this tape put down, they presumably send it immediately to Paul Allen. And we got the okay, no comment. So
just said, this is it.
Lamar's our guy. And of course, Brooke Olzendam had been here, I think 2 years previous to that, doing some other projects. They moved her up into that role as the sideline reporter. And she has been phenomenal as well, the way she has fit. So I really was blessed in that first swing at things, coming out here down to Portland to do the broadcast on television, to be blessed with just terrific people around me, whether it be Brooke or Lamar or our producer Dan Hyatt, or our director Jeff Curtin, and the crew, of course, is phenomenal. They were always known around the league, the broadcasting crew here in Portland, as being cutting edge, because they would travel. They'd travel any number of people, camera people, technical people, and so forth. I mean, it was a caravan that they would travel. The only other team that I can recall doing those types of things were the Sue Stratton, who was the longtime producer of Chick Hearn's broadcast in LA. They would always bring a big group as well of technical people and handheld camera people and so forth. So it was, it was a big deal. It was a big deal to land down here in Portland when I did.
Well, I think part of that is also just that the Blazers are one of the handful of teams, I don't know how many there are off the top of my head, it has to only be 2 or 3, that actually own their own broadcast and don't just like contract that part of it out to the regional sports network. Like they actually, all that stuff is in-house, so that might be why they travel so many people. Let me
Yeah,
ask you
good
this,
point.
like,
And that's probably why that they don't do it as much anymore, is because imagine the
it's the
cost.
overhead, right? I mean, that's why there was the whole thing, and I'm not going to
Yeah,
make you talk about this, but there was the whole thing this summer where they were maybe not going to send you guys on the
right.
road at all, and then that, like, yeah. But one more thing on the current broadcast, and I want to get back to Bill a little bit. But how has it been for you with, this year they've introduced Corey Jez, the analytics kind of analyst insider, into the broadcast to kind of give some of the more advanced. Like, how has that been? You've been around the NBA a long time. You obviously did it a certain way for a long time, and
Right.
incorporating that kind of stuff and like these second spectrum numbers that he's putting out there and some of the visual stuff, that's
Right.
got to be kind of new for you as somebody who's been in the business for decades. How has that been for you, like that adjustment and kind of that?
John, here's my spotting chart.
For those of you who are listening to this on audio, Kevin's holding up it's a totally old school like sheet of notes about.
Oh yeah, old is the word. It's an old manila envelope is what it is, legal size, that I do all my notes on.
Yeah.
But I tell you, the great Marv Albert. You see Marv show up for a game. He's got scraps of notes. He's got notebooks. He's got everything is handwritten. I did a game once with Marty Glick,
Yeah.
who again is supposed to be like the originator of all this stuff that we do on radio, play-by-play for basketball. Syracuse University, the old New York Knicks, the great Marty Glickman, a tremendous voice.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing an NCAA game. This is like 1980, 81. I'd gotten some freelance work with Learfield Communications, and they have sent me to Tennessee to do a tournament game. Big deal. It's a big deal. Doing an NCAA tournament game. And they're playing 2 games that afternoon in Tennessee, and I do the first, and then in the second, I'm supposed to keep stats for Marty Glickman. So he hears my broadcast, and he gives me a few pointers, which was terrific. And then he whips out his stat sheet, which was a piece of notebook paper with the names written by hand on both columns, height, weight, year, number. That was it. He had no stats. And I asked him about that, and he said, on radio, we're describing the smell of the popcorn,
Mm-hmm.
What's going on at the bench, the interchange between player and coach, the screen and roll, the basics of what's going on the floor. He says, I don't want to be encumbered with all that other stuff, he said, which was interesting because I thought, assist to turnover ratio would be kind of nice to talk about,
Right.
Something as basic as that. So the point of that story is you're always building. You're always building on what the other guy has done before, what has worked great for him, what has sounded, how can I make that a little bit better? And I think that's what Corey adds to the broadcast is, he said, the days of just looking at the box score, he says, are over. I remember our first meeting I had with Corey, you just don't look at the box score. We've got to look at some other things. Now there's, certain things in the box score you have to relay, I think, to fans without question. But his point was, and it was well taken by me, and it resonated, was, they're just numbers within those numbers that tell us even more, give us even more context about what's happening on the floor. So that's what we're trying to do when Corey does his presentation every night on the broadcast, is just give us a little more context, a little more texture, a little more understanding of the trends and things that are happening in front of us from a numerical standpoint.
Yeah. Did you kind of, going back to Schonely for a minute, did you get kind of towards the end of his, life and his time here because obviously he had his like big retirement ceremony at the last game of last season, kind of towards the end, did you get the sense, because you were just saying a little bit earlier that he would always tell you, hey, don't screw this up, and he would always kind of be a little bit hard on you. Did you kind of get the sense towards the end that he thought you were, doing the job justice and doing, he liked the job you were doing?
He went out. Well, no, I mean, Bill wasn't throwing me bouquets or anything, which was fine. That's cool. That
deep down the respect was there.
The respect was, that's all I needed. But
yeah.
No, when he would lean in and say, don't screw it up, that was the respect. That's right. Exactly what I needed to hear was, don't screw. It was like, make your free throws, don't screw it up.
Right.
No, he he was always very gracious. He'd always come in with some sarcastic comment about the team or the opposition or something.
Yeah. I mean, he's still kept up with
Oh,
everything with, and I have to
absolutely.
say, I only ever had a handful of conversations with him over the years. I didn't know him that well, but like,
Yeah.
he would be, he would always be. I've only been back here since 17. I was in Chicago before that, but I've only been back here for like what 5-6 years now. So, but he was always kind of be around, and physically, obviously, by the end, you could tell that his health was kind of declining. He was walking with a cane, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. You could tell that he was the age that he was. But right up until not only just like every conversation I ever had with him in the media room, but right up until that last day of last season when he had the big ceremony and then he gave a little press conference for us beforehand. I found him mentally to be just as sharp as he ever was. Like that part of it never really went away at all, even
No,
right up to the end.
no, he was lucid. There's no doubt about that. And his mobility, of course,
Right.
uh, that that was an issue. He had the hip. I think Kerry Eggers was telling me that he had the hip replacement done in October, and that's just because the pain was just
Yeah.
excruciating. And then I don't think that ever abated either, the pain. I was able to go over and see him actually a couple of weeks before he passed. And he was bedridden at the time. But
Right.
Donnie told me that he could get up, occasionally. But for the most part, and Kevin, the caretaker, was having to take care of him as well. And uh, he, I remember he was just kind of laying there napping, and I walk in. I didn't want to disturb him, and so I
Right.
sat there, and he woke up. He knew somebody was in his presence. He woke up, and we started talking Blazer basketball. He wanted to talk hoops.
And he was still watching. He was still up on everything.
Absolutely. What do you think of the club? What do we need to do?
Yeah.
What's next? What happens? That type of thing. So
Yeah.
it was good. And then he'd doze off, and I'd walk out, talk to Dottie a little bit, and then go back in. So I had about a 15-minute visit with Bill, and I knew that was more likely going to be the last time I'd see him. So
Yeah.
that was rough, but
Yeah.
it's my mom's 93 and she's still doing extremely well. She's lucid
That's
and
great.
so forth.
Yeah.
And that's just unfortunate. The mind is still sharp as can be, but
Yeah.
the body's just given away around you.
Yeah. When somebody gets to be that age, you kind of just know that
He lived a full life.
absolutely. I don't think he has any regrets about
No.
anything. And I'm also really glad that he decided to retire officially when he did, and they did the ceremony for
Yes.
him, and
Oh,
he was
wow.
able to get that happening, to have that happen for him while he was still alive, and not us talking about like,
Right.
oh, he died, and then we should have done something like this for him. Like
Yeah.
I'm glad that he got to see that. I'm glad that got to happen
No,
while he
and
was still around.
kudos to the organization and ownership and everybody buying in on that and putting that together. And Todd Bosman, who
Yeah.
does a lot of that stuff, all the stuff in.
Those guys do such a good job with everything. They did a great
The
job with
best.
Dame's, scoring record
The
a few weeks
absolute
ago.
best.
Like,
And Lamar, talking about Lamar Hurd, he was the one that introed and emceed Bill's
both of those
retirement,
things. Yeah,
and,
he was
and
so
it
good
just
with
did
that.
an
Yeah.
incredible job of introducing Damian Lillard after he had broken the scoring mark and doing that terrific impromptu introduction of Dame. So
Yeah.
you just run into so many talented people when you're doing these broadcasts and you're being around the arena. It's kind of overwhelming when you think about it.
It really is, and another one of those guys that I want to talk about a little bit. I realize this is going to be kind of a downer podcast, but it's been kind of a downer week in the Blazers organization, on and off the court. But somebody that I knew quite well, and you knew as well, being part of the broadcast team, that probably a lot of people who aren't on our end of the industry don't know as much as they know Bill, is John Curry, who passed away about a week ago, very unexpectedly. That was like we were saying with Bill, he was 93. We all kind of knew he wasn't doing great health-wise. We all kind of were braced for that one. But the thing with John Curry, that was just completely out of nowhere. And, you're starting to see all this stuff. Like the organization did a moment of silence for him before the Spurs game the other night. And he was a guy that, you're going to, you hear a lot of stuff about, like, he was just always the nicest guy. He never missed a day of work, and he was always, he was for those of you who don't know, he was one of the camera operators, and he had been with the organization for almost 40 years, and just everybody knew him, and he would always talk to anybody. He was just one of those guys that like was nice to everybody and was just great to talk to. I'm just I wanted to bring him up too.
Camera 6.
4.
Camera 4. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was 4.
Down on the baseline. Right next to the goal stanchion, where all the action happens, where everyone is running into you night after night. And that was the last time I talked to Curry. Was after one of those home games. Maybe it was the Mavericks game. He just got hammered. And you could see the welt on his face. The eyepiece had like hit him, but somehow these guys.
That was like a nightly thing for him, though.
Oh, it's a nightly thing, and he's been doing it for 39 years, and like all the shots he's taken over the years. At some point, I'm going to ask the guys. Maybe they've got it out there, and I haven't seen it, but just to put together a collection of the Curry hits. I mean, because he took some shots down there. I mean, all these guys do. And it's remarkable the way that they are able to bob right. It's almost like they're on a little bouncy ball there. They just bounce straight back up, and they somehow get themselves together for the next shot, and they get it done. But that was the last time I talked to him. I was like, man, that was a doozy. He just laughed, But he was always at the arena before anybody. The crews get there hours and hours in advance, and he would always have that camera set up in the media room where you and I and all the media go in to hear both coaches, and he's got that thing set up, and then he does the post, and he does the whole game, and then does the post game stuff as well when they bring the players and the coaches and everyone in. So, I didn't really get to know John that well, but I always appreciated the work that he did and the interchanges that I had with him, and I know it just took the heart out of our crew. So those last 2 games were tough. I mean, the Laker loss for obvious reasons,
right?
Everybody, that was just such a downer. And then, of course, we wanted to do the presentation well, and we did the presentation for Bill on that night. The Blazers played the Lakers and covered the Curry story as well, and then devoted. I thought it was great that I
think it was the right way
decided to devote a whole nother program to John Curry.
Yeah.
So
while I've got you, I know you've got a little production meeting to get to at noon, but switching to some on-court stuff for a little bit, what do you think is kind of responsible for this tailspin that the Blazers are in right now as somebody who knows the team better than probably anybody?
Boy, and you're hearing this every night, Sean. It's a combination of things. How many times have we heard that?
From Chauncey every night, from players every night.
I think, to me, it boils down to consistency on the defensive end. And to me, it so much depends on the consistency of a couple of key players on that defensive end. And there is such just a fine line between them being defensively not excellent, but just good and efficient, and just completely fallen off. And I don't think they've quite got the sweet spot yet. The fact that the Blazers bench was thin to begin with, and then had been decimated by injuries, and still to a degree with Justice Winslow being out. I mean, you can't tell me that LeBron is going to be as effective as he was with those straight line drives, scoring 16 points in the third quarter against the Blazers if you've got a 6'6", 225-pound defender and Justice Winslow out on the floor as an option, right?
Right.
But that's how thin they are. But now they're getting GP2 back, and he's starting to operate a little bit. Nasir Little looks sensational, showing confidence out on the floor. I think you could make a campaign for more minutes from Nasir Little.
I think that's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah. Because, I'm looking at his last 5 back since he missed 21. He's at 16, 12, 17, 13, and 17 minutes. I think you can make a real case for him playing in the mid-20s the way he's been playing. And with the kind of tenacity and now confidence that he's bringing out on the floor after, getting past those injuries. So I think Yusuf Nurkic he's got to be more consistent. He's got to be more active, less emotional, less encumbered by what the officials are doing out on the floor, and less distracted, and be focused on playing the defense as hard as you can for 26 minutes. And when setting a screen, it's not always important to get a piece of somebody. The fact that you're 300 pounds and you're the size of a car out there, people still have to avoid you. You don't need to move. Keep yourself solid. He's taken one or two of those calls a game, and it really hurts him. It hurts a club for him not to have a presence on the floor. Although Eubanks has played tremendously coming off the bench behind him and gives him a different dimension. But when you're facing guys like Jokic and Embiid, it's incumbent on number 27 to keep himself on the floor as long as he possibly can and play as hard as he possibly can. I think he's in good shape. He's got great intentions. He's got a terrific heart. Just needs to play smarter because so much depends on him defensively. So, and I love Nurk. I really do. I know he's got some detractors, but I love his game. I'm kind of an old school type guy. I think the Lillard Nurkic screen and roll is bread and butter, and I think the Blazers are starting to blend more and more of that in, and I would welcome that because Dame's free throws are 127 free throw attempts in January, the most in the NBA. His previous record was 150 in 2016. His personal record, club record, 150 free throws in a month.
Well, they're good. They've got like 3 or 4 more games that month, or this month. So I think it's probably
But the point being, he's going to the rack and he gets there and getting those drives, getting into the paint effectively with this big 300-pounder setting screens in the middle of the floor or on the side, and he's barreling in there to the rim. So, I think Chauncey's, like Chauncey said in the last game, hey, we're still learning one another, and that's the other thing. These guys have had really one full camp together, this group. And they've had so many different players that have rolled through here now, and it's just year and a half. And as he pointed out, and I hadn't even thought about this, maybe you had, but the other night, he said, I'm the coach with the least amount of head coaching experience in the NBA, or coaching experience for that matter in the NBA, with just a 1 year with the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, you got Will Hardy coming in tonight with Utah, who's 34 years old, and he is the youngest head coach in the NBA.
But he's been with the Spurs for
San Antonio
12 years, and then he was with Boston. Yeah,
exactly. So that just gives you some context into where we're at right now with the learning curve, and Chauncey has been accountable for when things have not gone well on the floor, and he's been a part of that. He's been accountable and was the other night as well. So yeah, it's 22 and 25, and with Damian Lillard having the kind of year he's having, with Simons and Grant scoring better than 20 a game, some big decisions obviously about impending free agency to Grant and Hart and so forth. Yeah, it almost feels like this year's at a crossroads here in the next 5-6 ball games for the Blazers.
What have you made of Shaedon Sharpe so far?
Well, he's electrifying for starters. I think that jump shot's solid. And he flies over people, flies through people, can slither and get to the rim and so forth. He obviously has defensive issues, and all 19-year-olds that are new to the league do. That's just a learning curve. And you've got to learn through playing. He's getting 19 minutes a night now, and he's played in 45 games. So I think defensively, he's obviously got a long way to go. He still needs to, I think, develop several counters when he, throws a move at a guy and they move their feet and they get into position to defend. He's wondering now, all right, now what? Now he's able, because of his crazy athleticism sometimes, to get himself out of those jams, but he's going to have to develop that, obviously, is that third move to the counter defensively. And but he's an extraordinary player in my view, just because of the athleticism and the ability to shoot the three. I mean, that's just that's an awesome.
Especially when he doesn't hesitate. This is something I've been saying the whole season is when he gets the ball on the perimeter, he needs to, because his jump shot is so mechanical. He needs to just let it fly, but too much, I think he'll, get the ball and then he'll hesitate, or he'll dribble into a little bit worse shot. That's not just him that does that. Obviously, there's been a lot of focus lately on Josh Hart needing to just shoot more, but Shaedon in particular, his shot is just so smooth. He needs to just get it and just go up with it. And I think the team, even though he's a rookie, I think the guys on Dame and Chauncey, I think everybody kind of feels that way too. Is that when he's got a shot, they want him to just take it.
I think I've not asked him about this, and it's a question I should ask him. You and I are talking about it. is the 19-year-old. He's brand new to what's going on. He's seeing Damian Lillard, the 6-time All-Star, 6-time All-NBA. He's seeing Anthony Simons, who's an extraordinary shooter.
Yeah,
and he's playing with one or the other at some point on the floor, and I just think he's deferring. That would be my simple explanation. Whether it be consciously or subconsciously, he's thinking maybe he's got better luck here. More likely he's the guy.
His place on the hierarchy is not
yeah. And I think he'll quickly shed that hesitancy without any doubt. Hopefully sooner, rather than later.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the crazy thing is, if they go 3-0 on the rest of this homestand, they've got
the West is wacky, man.
It really is. Like we're recording this a few hours before the Utah game tonight, and then they've got Toronto, who I know they lost to a couple weeks ago, but that's a below 500 team in the East. That should be theoretically a winnable game. And then Atlanta has been up and down, and they've had kind of their own issues with that organization. Those are 3 games they should be able to win, theoretically, on paper. If you go 3-0, you're back at 500 at the end of the month, and then you have the one more 3-game road trip, and then you got 5 more games at home before the All-Star break. Like, theoretically, like, as much as, like, it feels like the sky is falling right now with just how badly things have gone over the last couple of weeks, they've
gone badly.
They've gone very badly, and like that's
5-12 since losing those games to Oklahoma City on December 21st. Everybody points to the Laker game as being.
I think the Oklahoma City game is the two. You have to, and I know Oklahoma City is not, and this is something I have to keep like explaining to people. Oklahoma City is not in the same tier as like Detroit or San Antonio or Houston
Correct.
Or Charlotte or the teams that are actively like trying to lose games right now. Oklahoma City is not like talent-wise, they're not on the level of a lot of the teams that people expect to make the playoffs, but like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is having an all-NBA type of year right now.
Absolutely.
They've got guys like Josh Giddey's having a good year, Trey Mann's having a good year. That
George
team's well coached.
Gives us issues.
Yeah.
Jalen is a phenomenal. Jalen Williams, Santa Clara.
One of the two, yes.
Yeah, Santa Clara.
But like that's a team. They've got guys.
Isaiah Joe coming off the bench shooting threes, wicked hot.
But you still got to get one of those two.
You got to split.
You got to get one of those two, and I think that's when it kind of snowballed and started to spiral a little bit.
And the defense was horrible. I don't know how else to put it. Straight line drive, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You know where he's going. He doesn't shoot threes. He's going downhill. He's getting into the paint, and it just wasn't happening for the Blazers. So. Yeah, to me, I go back to that. They're 5-12 since losing those games to Oklahoma City on the 21st, and then 3-5 since coming back from the 0-3 Indiana Toronto trip. You got to pluck one of those. So it leaves you where you are, Sean. To your point, where you're now only 4 games back. Check that, only 2 games back of 6th and the Dallas Mavericks, who aren't exactly lighting the world on fire. They dropped another one last night, despite Luka getting what he get last night, 40,
something like that.
And they lose a ball game. It's there, and that's the frustrating part, obviously, for a guy like Damian Lillard, and any of these guys, is you're so darn close. If you can just put something together and sustain it for a while. You're right there in the mix, and now suddenly everything's popping and the mood is lifted. And that's why tonight, to me, this is a big game. This is a really good Utah team, solid team, coached by a terrific young coach who's going to get, I think, some consideration for Coach of the Year. I don't think he'll get it.
It's him or Mike Brown, I think.
But and they've done an excellent job too in Sacramento. But with Lauri Markkanen, who could be on the All-Star.
He's going to be All-Star.
Definitely be in the All-Star, but it's going to be on one of those All-NBA teams as well, I think. So Conley is back, did not play in the last game. Neither did Dame. So, I mean, this game really takes on, to me, again, big-time importance. And you get this one, and then I don't know. A lot of people don't believe in momentum and the old Mo and so forth. But I do. I believe that you start to feel better about things. You're going to get a couple of days to rest, recuperate, practice, fine-tune after you presumably get a win tonight. and then roll in this weekend against Toronto, and then with Atlanta before we go on the road again. So it all sets up right there for them. But we said that before the Laker game.
Yep, and then, they were talking about this the other night. That after the San Antonio game, that it's so hard when you have that type of collapse. You're up 25. You literally set a franchise record for scoring margin victory in a quarter in the second quarter, and you somehow lose that game by 9. It's really hard to then the next day come back and be able to just kind of put that in the rear view. And the fact that they were able to do that against and I know San Antonio is like one of the worst teams in the league, but that's still like they have NBA players on that team, and they obviously have one of the best coaches in history. Like it's not like that's a game they easily could have dropped, and they didn't.
Yeah, those guys over there are still getting paid. That's what I always say. And they were hitting threes, lights out, and 74 points at half, and you're thinking, holy cow.
Yeah. And then they started to separate themselves in the third, but yeah, it was kind of dicey there at the beginning. And that's why, like, what you were talking about with, like, the defense being needing to be more consistent, in the Laker game and the Philly game, I thought their defense was fine, and it was just the offense that, like, could not get anything going, especially in the second half of the Laker game. But,
it's easier said than done to say you can't allow LeBron James to go downhill. Well, yeah. But again, you don't have Winslow, and he's been going downhill for 20 years and averaging 27 a game. So you knew that was coming at you. But you can't let Thomas Bryant go 30 plus and 14 plus rebounds and shoot 85 plus from the field. That can't happen. You can't allow that to happen.
It's always one guy like that. Like in one of those Dallas games, Reggie Bullock, who was shooting like 30% from three, hits like 8 threes or something.
Yeah.
But
he's done that before.
He's been a good shooter in his career, but like it's just so fitting that like against Portland, one of these guys will always just like rediscover. Like Thomas Bryant going for 31 is like that.
No, the thing was, though, he did that against Sacramento earlier in the month. I was pouring through the notes like, this has got to be an anomaly. No, he had done it one other time, gone 30 or better, 14 or I think it was 14 plus rebounds and 85% or more from the field, and only two other guys in the history of the franchise, Shaq and Kareem. And I'll throw in Wilt, had ever done that. So, Thomas Bryant, hats off to you. The Lakers are now becoming the Wizards of the West now that they've acquired Rui Hachimura. I heard that one yesterday, and it kind of resonated with me.
Well, it's him.
Brown.
Troy Brown Jr.'s there.
And
Westbrook.
And Scott Brooks. And Scott Brooks was the coach of that Wizards team the year that they won the play-in and got into the playoffs. And it was the one year that Westbrook, I guess, was there with Hachimura. So there was talk that maybe he can draw him out into becoming a player that, so far we have not seen. So we'll see. But I thought that was an interesting side note, nonetheless, to a Blazer podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I know you've got a production meeting to get to in a few minutes, so I'll let you go. I really appreciate you doing this, Kevin.
My pleasure, Sean. We'll see what the next few weeks bring. It should be interesting.
Yeah, I'll see you in a couple hours.
Okay, man. Thanks.